My guest today is Dominique Bible. She was born in Brazil and raised in Brooklyn, New York, eventually dropping out of high school. That experience led Dominique to discover the importance of personal agency and self determination, as well as the possibility of alternative learning models outside of traditional schooling. Dominique earned a GED and enrolled at Goddard College, which embraces self directed education. After collecting undergraduate and graduate degrees from Goddard, focusing on culturally responsive and inclusive education, and spending time tutoring students in various subjects, Dominique decided to launch Off the Beaten Path Learning in 2020. It provides personalized guidance, encouragement, and mentorship for young people who are looking to take control of their education in creative, authentic ways, often outside of the traditional K 12 schooling system. Dominique Bible, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really um, appreciate this platform and the opportunity to share on it. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you being here. We had a chance to meet last year in person at a cafe in New York City when I was visiting education entrepreneurs there and seeing sort of what decentralized alternative education models were emerging in New York. So it was great to meet you in person. You have since moved to North Carolina. Now you do a lot of your work coaching and guiding unconventional learners remotely. And we'll talk more about that. But I'd love to start, Dominique, with talking about your experience as a learner in K 12 education. What was that like for you? What prompted you to eventually drop out and kind of come around to alternative self-directed modes of education?
Yeah, yeah. Um, Thank you. So my experience in K through 12 was that I got by until I didn't. And I think even when I was getting by, I have a very early memory of being in the first grade and in the back of the car pretending to sleep and maybe secretly crying and like really not wanting to go. And that sentiment stayed and was exacerbated, I think. Um, so that was Brazil, and then I came to Brooklyn and did third grade up until my super senior year of high school because I kept trying. I didn't drop out early. I kept going. And in speaking about my experience K through 12, I have to include the mental health aspect of it. It was so hard. It was so hard. And the sheer amount of sleep that I needed just wouldn't have been able to happen if it weren't for the fact that I was regularly chronically absent from the days of school. Um, and mom was scared, I was scared, mad, and it just kept trying the same thing, mostly because I didn't know that I had options. Um, it was like public school or private school, and it's all kind of the same conventional as I understood it, right? Um, Finally, I turned 18, and uh, it had the mental health stuff had come to this kind of climactic point. I was diagnosed with bipolar, and it just the climacticness of it. It was like such a hard year, 2009, that I think I was able to utilize that, thankfully, and turn that year of what felt like a lot of failure and problems and crises into something really beautiful, which was finding a solution to that. Finding options, finding choice was wildly empowering. At first, it was scary, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I got my GED in 2010, and I was volunteering at a GED center. So, tutoring and doing some substitute teaching on the days when it was needed, and there was nobody else because I was 18. So, um, but that was that was my first amazing job that I had, and um, it really opened my eyes to like what options can offer, knowing that you have options and what that can offer. Um, and there was just something communal that felt really more communal than school. Um, and then I slowly started discovering other forms of alternative education besides just the GED.
How did you discover
So
those and what were they, Dominique?
yeah, the first the first model that I ran into was democratic schooling, and I was listening to an NPR episode. This was 2012 that I was listening to this episode, but who knows when it actually aired. And they were talking about, oh, they were talking about Brooklyn Free School. Absolutely adore them. I volunteered there for a short stint after 2015 or something. Anyway, so I was listening to the radio and they were talking about there's no classes and there's no exams and they choose everything and they go outside, they use the bathroom whenever they want. And it was like, what? This exists? And then that just, I mean, spiraled in like the best way possible. I ended up finding Arrow, alternative education resource organization, and went to a conference, found Goddard. I mean, goes on.
Yeah, so then you decided to kind of return to more formal education, albeit in a college that embraces self-directed learning. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that experience at Goddard, getting both undergraduate and graduate degrees. What was that like?
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Um, a friend of mine, when she showed up on campus, I think he was a librarian at the time, said, "Welcome home." And they didn't know each other at all, but it rang true for me anyway. Um, I think that's what a really good human service organization does, is it feels like a home away from home. You feel like you can be your whole self. And that's what Goddard did for me. I think the self-directed nature, especially of the program that I chose. So within the education department at Goddard College, they're changing now, but they used to have a more conventional road where you could get certified to be a teacher in a classroom, and then they in different areas. And they also had this less, they had an individualized, completely individualized program where you really shape it how you want to shape it. And then they also had community education. And I was really taken with community education because it's feels very by the people for the people. Labor organizing takes a lot of its methodologies from community ed, or I mean, I don't know, chicken or the egg. I don't know really which comes first, but they blend into each other quite a bit. So that's like Paulo Freire, that's Miles Horton, um, all these really important people that, and it was mostly for adults. In fact, I mean, not completely. I think Freedom School does a good job of being in like community ed influenced. Freedom schools being um, uh, um, they're all over the country now, and I worked for a site in Red Hook Initiative. I'm going on a tangent. Um, Goddard provided that home away from home because I had that flexibility to be myself, right? So I could choose to show up to a workshop or not choose to show up to a workshop. I could shape all of the community ed courses that I was going to do. I had one called humor education, um, you know, however I wanted it. And so it really met my needs very uniquely. Um, Allowing me to be myself.
So then what happened next? After you finished at Goddard with your degrees, what did you do then?
So I'll say what happened after I started Goddard, because I was at Goddard for quite a bit of time. And in that, so much occurred, right? So I'll come back to Red Hook Initiative, great segue, to bring up that that was another wonderful, wonderful, wonderful organization where I felt like it was a home away from home. And I think a lot of the people that young people, staff members also feel that way there. Red Hook Initiative is a youth-based nonprofit in Brooklyn, and their mission is all about positive social change, starting with the neighborhood that they serve, Red Hook in Brooklyn. And they are community ed 100% without really trying. And I guess that's why it was so awesome. It happened kind of accidentally, but for me and for them. Um, but it taught me, it showed me this collective, um, the power of a collective reaching its goals. And it was kind of that exercise that I needed to take theory into practice. So I was at RHI on and off for a few years, 5 years in total. Um, and after that, I I focused on self-directed learning. So between that, I found DITA Academy in Brooklyn, and that was also really fundamental to my like going into homeschooling in particular. That was a homeschool learning center in Brooklyn. Um, these great kids, there were I think 12 of them at max, and we were in this tiny little studio making all this ruckus and playing and learning, and there was mentoring, and it was very individualized. And that's where my eyes opened up to how self-directed education combines with homeschooling. And then from there, after some time, they closed their doors, partly I think due to COVID. And one of my former learners from that time, and this actually goes into off the beaten path learning and how it came to be, was not really my decision. Um, so this learner reached out and they said they needed a talent manager. And I was really into the idea. I was like, I got you. I got you. Your talent, I'll manage. Um, I'll help you actualize it. I'll help you take it where it's got to go. And I've actually done, I think if you had to put a ratio on it, not nearly as much as they have. And that's kind of the point with self-directed education. It's kind of the wonderful opportunity of it for the learner to really take charge and be the captain of their own ship. And I'm the navigator. I'm over here like uh, at the port, kind of like locking it down when it needs to be locked down and keeping them accountable. And they do the actual, they're out there leading the direction. And I just got the map. So.
I love that idea as a talent manager. What a great term. I mean, you're really sort of a coach, a guide, a champion of people who want to take charge of their own learning and feel empowered to do that. And because often that's a contrarian act, especially for young people who are still, school age, traditional school age, it's helpful to have a cheerleader in your corner. When we met last year, Dominique, I remember you told me that you said, my genius is seeing other people's genius and helping them actualize it. And I think that's such a great way of putting what you do and how you help others. You also mentioned DITA Academy, which I wrote about in Unschooled, and just a wonderful place that, as you said, combined self-directed education with homeschooling in Brooklyn. So as you started working with this young person who wanted you to be the talent manager, at what point did you say, maybe I'm onto something here. Maybe this is actually an organization. Maybe I should kind of hang up a shingle and be an entrepreneur, guiding others to take charge of their learning. What was that like?
Yeah. Yeah. The development is still in development. Still very much in development. A slow starter here. Um, so our first step was to get a website. That happened October of 2021. So a little over a year. And I think I had been at that point, I was 5 learners, maybe 6 learners had, come through the off the beaten path learning process. And I was like, okay, I got to let the world know this is a thing, website. And then some months after that, we did the LLC. We got some branding. Um, and like I said, it's still in a process of slowly developing. And I kind of learned with it, which I really like. Um, yeah.
So I wonder if you could share some examples, obviously generically, of some of the types of people that you're serving. Give us some examples of who's coming to you, what are they looking for, and how are you helping them?
Yeah. Um, there are the young ones, right? So children. There are the less young ones, the young adults, and then there are the adults. So in the K through 12 world, I've recently there was a young man who wanted to master breakdance. Um, and, I just kind of happenstance started talking to his mom and about, off the beaten path learning and the power of choosing for yourself and building upon that. And she was really inspired. And so she went to her family, her child, and they talked it over and we had a conversation and the rest is history. And I think for for a lot of the learners, for all of the learners, it's interesting. I think the biggest impact is confidence. It wasn't my intention. My intention is about power. I say I'm in the business of power via choice. So through this vehicle of you choose, you decide for yourself what your life is going to be, what you're going to learn and how and where and all of that. But I think the impact that I've observed throughout all of these, including that breakdancer, is this confidence. Um, in For him, it was um, knowing that I know how to learn myself, and confidence with his own personal development, and confidence with himself as someone that is mastering a skill that he has fully chosen. No one, besides him chose that.
And is
Um,
he is he still was he enrolled in a traditional school, or was this sort of working with him outside of school? What was that like?
that's a great question. So yeah, a lot in school, that particular person, and most of the learners are, if they're adults, they were schooled, and if they're young people, they are schooled.
Hmm.
Um, I've worked with a few homeschoolers, but by and large, schooled, whether that's in an alternative kind of private situation or a public school, um, schooled, which has been interesting, right,
Mm.
for me because I've got a bias and I don't hold back in sharing it. I did not like school. Um, but ultimately, my, flag that I wave is about choice.
Yeah.
And so the learners in particular, I was his writing coach. And eventually he was like, no, thank you. And I was so proud of him for deciding that he didn't want to do off the beaten path learning anymore. He wanted to be in school and stick with that independently. Um, and even though it wasn't perfect, it was what allowed him to feel that he was doing the most in that independent learning. For some people it works. And so if you choose that, then I did my job. I'm beyond excited about that. Recently, I had someone reach out and say, my teenager is just starting to unschool and she's unsure. Can you help?
Hmm.
Absolutely. And then after a little while, she was like, actually, my teenager has decided they don't need a coach.
Mm.
Again, I love that. Like,
That's so great.
hey,
So that's
you
great. It's
make your
almost like
decision.
you're like a deschooling midwife, right? For some kids who may be exiting the traditional system, going through that deschooling process. You're there just to help
Yeah.
them through that transition of being kind of told what to learn and being stripped of our sort
Yeah,
of personal agency and autonomy to then being able to discover that again and rekindle kind of a natural human curiosity. So it must be a gift for you to be able to see that.
it is. It's a real honor um, to be that bridge, like you said, in a period of transition. Um, it sometimes feels that like I'm the educator that I needed when I was younger, and that's really wonderful.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question for you, Dominique, is kind of now knowing what you know now. What do you think would have been your ideal learning environment when you were in, an adolescent in middle school or high school? What would have been good for you?
What would have been good for me? Thank you for asking that. Um, I think is very similar to what my longest running learner does, which is almost fully unschools. I think for me, I'm the kind of person that the amount of flexibility I need is controversial. Um, and unschooling provides for that. So that specific kind of homeschooling where you're home, but also there's not a set, no one else is telling you what's up model, that would have been the format for me to flap my wings at the highest capacity.
Yeah, and ultimately you did that.
And
It just took time, right?
right, it took time and it happened. I was older.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and and I would say there was a bit of damage along the way too, because
Mm,
school was I wonder if the term school trauma
hmm.
is being studied um, because it should be. Um, yeah, yeah. And yeah, yeah, I think I would have needed support, much like a one-on-one person, not a therapist, but specifically an education-oriented one-on-one professional. Um, Whether it was a coach or a mentor, it doesn't really matter. It could be a butterfly. I don't care what you call it.
Mhm.
Just someone that's dedicated to, helping you get there.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts, Dominique, about these headlines that now, talk about skyrocketing rates of chronic absenteeism, kids not wanting to go back to school, particularly since 2020, and all of these sort of millions of dollars being funneled into programs to get kids back in school and keep them there. I wonder about your thoughts on that, especially as somebody who, as you said, kind of dealt with trauma in school and didn't want to go, and now maybe working with young people who are experiencing something similar.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that as well. The headline here is it's sad. It's really, really expletive words, sad. Um, because what it shows me is that there are a lot of children trying to make their own choice, trying to signal, I don't want to do this. This is not what I think I need. And I think families are scared, and rightfully so. There's a lot at stake, and swimming against the grain is not the easiest thing to do, nor is it affordable sometimes. So it's a hard situation, but I'm really grateful that there is also this kind of explosion of options. I'm, I mean, here you are hosting this podcast, talking to all of these other education entrepreneurs that are out there creating, birthing all these options, options, options. So I hope that my message of you can choose what is right for you reaches more people, maybe reaches some of those people for whom absenteeism is a thing. And they realize, okay, if this isn't working, let me find what does, let me find what is, let me find what will.
Yeah, I love your point that the young people are sending a signal as best they can that they don't want this coercive classroom. They want something different. And you're right. Thankfully, there are so many more options available to families. They're more accessible to more families than ever before. And there's people like you who can help young people to, again, regain control over their learning and their overall education. So I'd love to hear, Dominique, kind of your plans for the future with Off the Beaten Path Learning. What do you hope to do to kind of grow and develop the organization in the coming years?
Yeah. So originally we started with 5 to 24 was the range that we were, the ages 5 to 24 was the range that we were focusing on. And now we have since opened up the doors to adults as well. So a third of our adults, a third of our learners have been adults, whether they are receiving off the beaten path learning as a parent or as a professional. That is, whatever goal they're going for, I'm here to help them grow. I'm here to help them actualize that creativity and power. And I think I'm also considering what it would mean to serve under 5 as well. Um, so that's a thought, is what would that look like? I mean, the family would need to be present, and it would kind of be this like the family is the learner, but the focus is on the little teeny one, as opposed to I'm working with you as mom. Um, and so there are adults and kind of toddlers that are being served now, or at least adults and considering younger children. And I think I'm also very curious about reaching out to organizations and professional development and what it can look like to harness self-directed education influenced by community education and have that be something that helps collectives, right? So what would it look like uh, for example, an after school program that is maybe they're training their staff on conflict mediation. What would it look like for them to have off the beaten path learning come in and help them with that process of getting them to that goal that they just defined for themselves? Um, yeah, yeah.
I love seeing your flexibility and kind of foresight and thinking about what individuals could be looking for and how you could help to serve them, and especially partnering with organizations to help their own members or individuals to become more self-directed as adults. I think it's really exciting to see where this will go for you, and great to see your success so far. So, Dominique, if my listeners and viewers want to connect with you, learn more about your services at Off the Beaten Path Learning, what is the best way for them to do that?
The website. So that is off the beaten path, and the is DA intentionally. So offdabeatenpath.com. And if you scroll to the very bottom of the page, you can sign up for the newsletter, which is quarterly. We send out, learner highlights and what we're up to and company highlights and all that fun stuff, celebration type stuff. And at the top of the page, there's a schedule, a time to talk if you're curious about this actual model, and what it would be to have that one-on-one dedication to your learning, right? Whether you are interested in for your child or for yourself or for your company, that really another dedicated human. Two is better than one. Two minds on one trajectory. It doubles the impact. So yeah, offthebeatenpath.com.
I love it. Well, it has been so great to connect with you again, Dominique, and to hear about all of your exciting initiatives. I wish you the best. Dominique Paloma Bible, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.